why the planet stopped exploding. There was a time when violence felt inevitable. Eruptions rewrote the surface faster than memory could form, and every calm moment seemed temporary. Even after Earth learned to move its fire underground and stabilize its atmosphere, the planet still carried immense internal energy. This matters because stored energy always seeks release, and for much of Earth's early history, that release arrived explosively. Worlds often fail at this stage, unable to regulate their own power without tearing themselves apart. The challenge was not to eliminate the energy, but to find a way of expressing it that did not destroy what the planet had spent so long building. Inside Earth, radioactive decay and residual heat continued generating pressure. But now, instead of bursting upward indiscriminately, that energy followed structured pathways. Mantle currents carried heat sideways, spreading it across vast regions rather than concentrating it beneath the crust. The planet was diffusing danger instead of amplifying it. The convective system that had once been chaotic was now organized enough to distribute thermal energy across the entire interior, preventing the localized buildups that had once produced catastrophic surface eruptions. At the surface, this change appeared subtle. Volcanoes still erupted, but they did so along recurring boundaries instead of everywhere at once. Earthquakes released stress incrementally, preventing pressure from building to catastrophic levels. The surface learned how to flex rather than fracture. The transition from random volcanism to boundary-focused volcanism was one of the most consequential shifts in the planet's history, though it occurred so gradually that no single moment marked it. This shift marked a psychological turning point in the planet's history. Earth no longer behaved like a bomb waiting to detonate. It behaved like a system managing its own intensity. Motion continued, but destruction lost its unpredictability. The planet had crossed from a regime where violence was a default expression of energy into one where controlled motion served the same purpose with far less damage. The planet had not cooled enough to be safe. It had learned how to stay dangerous without destroying itself. And that distinction would determine whether Earth could endure for billions of years more. This moderation of Earth's internal violence emerged from balance rather than loss. The planet did not shed its energy quickly or completely. Instead, it slowed the rate at which that energy reached the surface. Heat moved through thickened crust, dissipating gradually instead of erupting in global floods of magma. Pressure found release in motion rather than rupture. The crust itself became an active participant in this regulation, its varying thickness and composition, creating a complex filter between the planet's thermal interior and its vulnerable surface. Tectonic plates became the primary regulators of this process. By sliding, colliding, and separating, they converted built-up stress into movement that could be absorbed over time. Earthquakes, though powerful, released energy in increments, preventing the kind of massive rupture that once threatened to erase the surface entirely. The plate system functioned as a pressure valve, allowing continuous small releases that prevented the catastrophic accumulations of earlier eras. The atmosphere and oceans played supporting roles. Water infiltrated crustal faults, lowering melting points and easing deformation, while oceans absorbed heat that would have otherwise intensified eruptions. These surface systems dampened extremes, working alongside interior processes to maintain control. The interaction between water and rocket subduction zones created a feedback loop that further regulated volcanic intensity. As hydrated rock melts at lower temperatures, producing less explosive eruptions than dry rock forced to the surface under extreme pressure, the build-up toward stability was not linear. Periods of heightened activity still occurred, testing the planet's limits. But each surge was followed by recovery rather than collapse. The planet was proving that it could absorb stress repeatedly without losing coherence. Large igneous provinces still formed occasionally, flooding regions with basalt and disrupting atmospheric chemistry. But even these events no longer threatened to return the planet to its earlier state of global resurfacing. This was the emotional tension of the era. Earth remained powerful, restless, and potentially destructive, but power had become contained. The planet was no longer at war with its own energy. It had found a way to coexist with forces that had once seemed incompatible with surface survival. It had learned how to release force without resetting itself. As this controlled release became the norm, Earth entered a new relationship with time. Stress no longer accumulated until it demanded violent resolution. Instead, it dissipated continuously through countless small adjustments that rarely drew attention. The planet was changing all the time, but in ways that allowed memory to persist. The geological record from this era forward becomes increasingly detailed, not because more was happening, but because more was surviving. This shift altered how the surface evolved. Landscapes could form, erode, and reform without being erased wholesale. Oceans remained liquid across long spans. Atmosphere and climate responded to gradual trends rather than sudden shocks. Earth systems began operating on overlapping timescales, smoothing the impact of disturbance instead of magnifying it. The layering of timescales itself became a stabilizing mechanism, as processes operating at different speeds buffered one another against disruption. The build-up toward this moment revealed something subtle but profound. Explosions had once been Earth's language of release because no other option existed. Now, motion, deformation, and flow had replaced eruption as primary responses. Violence had been translated into process. The same quantity of energy that had once produced surface devastation was now being expressed through plate movement, mantle convection, and gradual crustal deformation, forms of release that preserved structure instead of destroying it. This was the emotional peak of the planet's restraint. Earth did not become gentle. It became disciplined. Energy still moved, but moved with direction, guided by structure and feedback instead of chaos. The discipline was not imposed from outside. It emerged from the planet's own internal organization, a natural consequence of systems that have been refined by billions of years of trial. Many worlds never reached this stage. They burned too hot, cooled too fast, or fractured beyond repair. Earth survived because it found a way to stay active without tearing itself apart. The narrow path between thermal death and explosive self-destruction is one that few planets navigate successfully. The planet had stopped exploding not because it ran out of power, but because it learned how to live with it. The climax of this transformation was the moment Earth's violence stopped defining its future. Eruptions, quakes, and upheaval did not vanish, but they no longer determined whether the planet could continue. Destruction had been reduced to scale. What once reset everything now reshaped only parts. The planet had achieved a state where its most powerful internal forces served construction rather than destruction. The resolution lies in what this restraint allowed to endure. Long-lived surfaces could accumulate history. Oceans could remain stable long enough to regulate climate. Atmospheres could persist without being blasted away or poisoned beyond recovery. Earth had crossed into a state where continuity outweighed catastrophe. The conditions necessary for complex chemistry, and eventually biology, depended on this exact transition from global violence to localized, manageable disruption. This did not make the planet safe. It made it survivable. Energy still flowed, pressure still built, and release still came. But release no longer erased memory. The planet could change without forgetting itself, adapt without starting over, and remain dynamic without self-destruction. What stopped Earth from exploding was not cooling, exhaustion, or luck. It was organization. Structure replaced chaos. Process replaced violence. The planet learned how to express power without surrendering its future. Earth did not become quiet. It became controlled. Subscribe to join the journey. Why